Welcome everybody, both here live at the Victorian College of the Arts Theatre or wherever you may be tuning in online. Great to see such a wonderful turnout for a Sunday, and I'm sure you're going to find this afternoon a very informative and action-packed event. So we're really looking forward to it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brent Crockett. I'm President of the Victorian branch of the Australian Cinematographer Society, and it's my privilege to be able to host this event today. I'd first like to acknowledge the land in which we're gathered on today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to welcome our representatives from NAN Studios and from Vic Screen, who have been in collaboration with the ACS to bring this event to you today. And later on, we've got a little announcement to make that I'm sure you'll all be very interested in. I'd like to thank the VCA for the care and facilities that they've provided today, and to our sound guy Jack Carter and video guy who's been working tirelessly to try and get the audio sorted. It's a big shout out to him to do today. But I'd just like to request that any recording of this event we don't want to have done. Thank you very much, and you may take some shots on the mobile phones, but if you could refrain from putting it up on social media and stuff, that would be greatly appreciated. So our special guest today is arguably one of the world's leading cinematographers, and for those of you who may not know Greig Fraser, ACS, ASC, Greig began his career here in Melbourne before moving to LA in 2008, where he now lives with his wife and 3 children. He's won a number of awards for his work, most significantly an Emmy for his work on The Mandalorian, and he also won a BAFTA, ASC and Academy Award for his work on the movie Dune. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that throughout the course of the afternoon. We're also joined, zooming in from Budapest in Hungary, Greig's VP Assistant Tomas Paps, and together Tomas and Greig have put together a bit of a test presentation that we're going to screen, and it's been done exclusively for us, so really excited to see that. So we'll also do obviously a quick Q&A. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions that come out of the event today. So without further ado, could you please welcome Tomas Paps and Greig Fraser, ASC, ACS.
Thanks, Brent.
Afternoon, guys. Good to see you. And Greig, I believe you're on holidays at the moment up in Bali, so I hope the things are going well up there, mate.
Just letting you know and letting everybody know in advance, I've had 6 weeks in the jungle in Bali. So if I make any sense, it'll be a miracle. So I'm here, I'm not drunk, so I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, terrific, mate. And good to see you on the call, too. I know it's pretty early in the morning there for you, Tomas, but thanks for zooming in and joining us today. It's great to have you on the call.
Thank you for the invitation.
Terrific. Hey, Greig, I'd just like to start with you, and just for the people in the audience that don't know, but a bit of your background, because you started your career here in Melbourne, and I remember back in the early 80s being an AC and all that sort of stuff. But if you go back, how did you get an interest in filmmaking and particularly in cinematography? How did you start off in the industry?
I trained as a photographer at RMIT and thought that that's what I wanted to do until I realized that, photography is a very solo existence. And then I joined a film studio called X Films and saw all the filmmakers there. And saw how filmmakers work together and improve each other's work, and, the knock-on effect of teamwork, which was really important to me. And I sort of decided, okay, well, maybe I'll become a director, because that's the natural progression from a photographer, because a lot of photographers were doing that. And then I realized that I just didn't enjoy directing. I directed some spots and I did some things, and I realized quite quickly I didn't want to become a director. So it seemed like a really good fit for me. What I loved doing was cinematography, which was the direct kind of relation to photography. And yeah, I love working with actors, love working with directors, and so it seemed like it's a natural progression, and I seem to fit really well into that world. It seemed to suit me down to a T. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. And I started in Melbourne doing smaller music videos, some charity commercials, and did some short films. Got some success with some of those, and then eventually did some features. And then, at that time, my wife and I decided to go to America just for fun, not to chase a dream of any description, just because we wanted to kind of explore the world a bit. And that's where we ended up.
Fantastic. So, what was the biggest break that you got once you got to LA? I mean, obviously it's massive pace, Hollywood, all that sort of stuff. How did you actually break into that system? What got you into?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have done some international commercials before I'd left, and I'd also done some films that were playing in the US. So I was able to kind of do some meetings and meet with some people about films with some other films that were out already. And I got some, kind of a bit of, the wheels started turning. I did a film called Let Me In, which was the first Indian film that I'd done. And then I did Andrew Dominic's film, Killing Them Softly. Then I did Snow White Valentine. Then I did Zero Dark Thirty. So it just seemed to just keep rolling, and I was doing commercials in between those and having a great time. And one of the great things about LA, I mean, again, just to reiterate, we didn't move to LA we weren't chasing the Hollywood dream that everybody talks about when it comes to actors or movie making. We were just there because we were living by the beach in Bass, and we were just having a great lifestyle, really. But, one of the first series of music videos that I did when I got to LA was a Spike Jonze music video for Arcade Fire, and I did a Trent Reznor thing, and it seemed like the trading wheels were off, and I was being able to really explore the craft on a bigger scale, which was really exciting at that point in time.
Yeah, fantastic. So then you sort of got the opportunity to work on, one of the sort of Star Wars films, and to start with Rogue One, and then that sort of led you on to getting on to the Mandalorian and working with this new technology. So how did you discover this new technology, and what was your involvement with it, with this virtual production?
Well, it was an interesting one. I had worked with, I had done Rogue One, and as part of some of the stuff that I'm going to present today, actually, I'm going to show some photos of the volume that we did for Rogue One. So I'll give you a brief backstory. I mean, this kind of will lead into what we're talking about today, which is virtual production and the screen that NAB has down in the Docklands there. So to get to that question, I just wanted to go back a few steps and talk about what virtual production maybe started life as, movie projection, which was the Alfred Hitchcock thing. Let me share screen. I've got some video just because, by the way, I'm very ill prepared for this. There's no PowerPoint presentation. I've got nothing. So I'm terrible at teaching. So as I said to you, Brad. So, the Alfred Hitchcock reprojection thing that he did, which was, very basic back in the 50s and 60s, which is effectively just a reprojection screen with a foreground lighting. So moving forward a step, the next step was blue screen, as we know. We all saw that back in the sort of the 80s and the 90s. And then we started to look at something like Oblivion. I don't know if you guys remember seeing Oblivion. There was the scene in Oblivion where they projected, or they front projected, I think, this particular location. And this was an incredible, when I saw this, it was back in, 2012 or 2013 or something? It was mind-blowing, because what it did is it effectively put the lighting of a set back in the hands of a cinematographer, because more often than not, when we're lighting blue screen, we have to light the blue screen to the specifications of the VFX department. And so what this allowed, and what I saw with this, was that it allowed the cinematographer to take back some of the control, because the lighting was again back in the control of the cinematographer. Now, if you also remember, Gravity did some LED work, if you recall. Gravity did LED screens that were reflected on reflected on the actors, and then they did the VFX after. So effectively what this did was it turned the tables from blue screen being predominantly lit so that it could be keyed, which was generally what everybody thinks the most important thing about blue or green screen is, to being that the scene was being lit the best way, which then integrated the VFX the best way. So even though that seems like a really logical thing for VFX, for DPs, it's not the standard way of working. Generally, people need a strong key against the background. They need the hair picked out, so you need to backlight the hair, even though that may not be natural. The screen needs to be an even tone, even though the tone might be too bright or too dark, depending on the scene that you're putting into it. So again, what this did, and I think this showed the world how important it was that the lighting led the charge and not the post, if that makes sense. Obviously, post is integral to making it all come together, but I think this led the charge. So going on to Rogue, there was a scenario that we had where we had to shoot all the ship stuff, which was the interior ship. It's them getting out of Yavin, it's them flying into Jeddah, it's them flying into Scarif. There's a ton of ship work. Let me just see if I can share these. So if you recall, in Rogue, there was a scenario where we had the interior ship stuff. So part of the debate that I had with, whenever you're coming up with a production plan, you're always talking about how the best to do things. How the best to shoot on a backlight or shoot a scene. Do you build it? Do you go to a location? Do you do it against blue screen? And so I pitched the idea to ILM and to Lucasfilm that actually for all this interior ship stuff, we build a big LED volume, which was effectively like Gravity has done, but on a much bigger scale. And the upticking cost for this versus doing this against blue screen was considerable. So we had months of debate about this, and the idea was that ILM had been working on the idea of the screen, the stage of the future, which George Lucas had dreamt of years prior, which is effectively a stage with walls that changed color, that changed the light depending on what the scene was. So it was effectively that. And so ILM saw it and went, this could be the state of the future that George has been talking about. So they chipped in some budget for this, and we worked to get that film going. But then in the subsequent years after that, we were working together trying to improve it. There were problems with that. That was a 9mm panel, so that whenever you pulled focus to the screen, the LEDs morayed. So therefore we had to use shower screen in front of the panel so that they didn't moray. Because when you pull focus through it and it goes through the screen, it sort of tears the edge of the image, which means that you can't get a good key off it. So there was a bit of a problem in that sense. But as the years progressed, and we're not talking many years here, we're talking about 2015 to 2018. So there's 3 years difference. And the technology improved where the pixel pitch went from 9mm down to about 3mm. And so it was at that point that Lucasfilm called me and said, hey, okay, we're working on a TV show, and we'd love to try and incorporate all the R&D that you've been doing with ILM on it. And I said, okay. And I agreed to do it. I didn't really want to get back into the Star Wars universe because I feel like I hadn't done that. But what was interesting was that I knew this technology was coming, down the pike, and I needed to make sure that it was controlled correctly. It was controlled by cinematographers, because invariably, and this is part of the discussion why we're having this now with cinematographers at the core, is that because this is new technology, it can be co-opted by people that know more about technology but know less about image making. And when that happens, then you end up with unsuccessful product, I guess, unsuccessful images. And so the reason why I did Mandalorian was to make sure that when we built this world, we built it in a way that was going to be, basically I wanted to hit it out of the park. I said to them, like, there's only one way to do it, and we had to do it and hit it out of the park, which meant that if there were scenarios that didn't suit the volume, that we would take them outside or would build sets. But the stuff that did go under the volume was the most successful. Let me share screen again. Here we go. So I'll just play this as I'm talking. So the concept was that this is not Mandalorian, obviously, this is the dodgy green screen, which is the antithesis of what we were aiming for. But when we eventually got around to doing the test, we realized that actually with Unreal Engine, which was a 3D gaming engine, with the ability to change parallax and as well as the lighting, that was the game-changing event. It was the time when you can move the camera, like you're seeing there, and the whole background changes. Like before that point, it was really just an expensive translate. Like it was just a really complicated, expensive translate. But the second that 3D gaming engine could be applied to it, it started to become a lot more powerful. And so going down the road with ILM meant that we effectively came up with a set of rules. We came up with a set of parameters that we could say, okay, well, this is where it works really well. And continually, we would try being asked to sort of set locations, exterior desert locations. And I'd always sort of say, no, doesn't work, because of the lighting quality. And so one of the good things about Mando was I was able to control the path of information, because what's always happening, and this is kind of what I want to get into today, and this is part of the reason for this discussion, is because you have as a crew, like when some new technology comes in, it tends to get co-opted and tends to get controlled a bit more by other departments. And in this case, ILM, who did a fantastic job of doing all of our loads, they gave me the ability to be able to kind of control what went on the screen at any given time. So I went back to the writers and said, okay, maybe stage a scene at dawn, at dusk, or just after sunrise, or maybe outside the door there's a landscape and not a tree, or whatever it was. But it basically allowed me to take back control that I would normally take when I was doing normal cinematography and not virtual cinematography. So this is a very good example, actually. This is a location that we photogrammetried in Los Angeles, and then changed in 3D. We changed the windows to look Star Wars in, and then we put the chair and the table. So that's what the set looked like, if you can see that. And that's the background. So what that allowed us to do was it allowed us to kind of get very, very good budget, like shoot a lot of turnover effectively, shoot a lot of page count in a very short amount of time.
Fantastic. That's great. So you've got some test footage. Well, actually, no, before I tell that, how did you and Tomas, that relationship start, and how did you discover each other?
So one of the things that that's become really apparent to me, which is again part of the reason for this conversation with the cinematographers, is how important it is that we start to understand the future of technology. And 3D gaming engine and Unreal Engine is a really important thing for us to understand as cinematographers. Generally, the people that understand it most are the art department that know SketchUp or know 3D Studio Max, or the post department that do all the post effects. And generally, the cinematographers have been kept in the dark a bit. We haven't really had an ability for us to have a department with Unreal or virtual production people. And so on Dune Part 2, knowing the importance of how this technology was going to help us, I pushed to hire an assistant that had virtual production experience or knew Unreal, and that was Tomas. So Tomas is also a cinematographer who is training in Budapest, who has trained in Budapest. And so that combination of cinematography and virtual production experience meant that he and I could work very closely at bringing Unreal and bringing 3D into the post path for Dune Part 2. So obviously I can't show any of that stuff now. I can't show any of that because it's not released. But we've got some test footage that we shot, or sort of some test scenes that we lit to be able to kind of to give everybody an overview of what working in Unreal is like. So if there are some questions to start talking about stuff now, I'm happy to do that.
We've got a question here from Warwick Field, ACS, and he asks, when the LED volumes first came into use, were you doubtful as to how effective it would be?
No, I was the one pushing for them. There was other people who were very doubtful about it. No, I knew how good it could be because we'd shot Rogue One on it, and I stood in the volume, I stood in the cockpit of those ships and was blown away about how good the quality could be and how amazing it is for a cinematographer. Again, it's lighting. It's all lighting based, and here is part of the misconception that I've been trying to clear up a bit, because as producers are trying to save money, these things that we call the volume for Mandalorian, which was almost a full 360 wall and a ceiling, started to become just a wall. And yet it still got called a volume. I received phone calls from quite senior DP saying, what the hell is this volume thing you've built? It's terrible. And I find out they've got a 20 by 20 screen behind them, and they've been asked to light a screen. Now, that's no different to lighting a blue screen, in my opinion. Sure, you can see a background, but the quality and the value comes from, as a cinematographer, from having full 360 control of the light. I mean, could you imagine, we go into an exterior location and we can control where the sun sets, and we can control how long it takes for the sun to set, and we can control the exact time of day that we're there, and we're not having to debate it with a first AD or a producer. The power of the volume is firmly entrenched in the cinematographer. And if we're designing to that and we're working to it and designing locations that play to that power, then we're going to be better served, and we're going to look better. As a cinematographer, you are going to come out of it smelling really rosy because your work is fantastic. So to that point, Brent, we've talked a little bit about this in the past. It goes back a few steps where, the people who control what goes on the volume, as in that you shoot on the volume, should be the cinematographer and the designer and the director. Those three people should be the same people that decide, what location you shoot on. Do you build this location? Do you go on the backlot? The three people who decide on that should be the people who have the most experience blocking and designing a scene. And so the one thing I've heard a lot about is that cinematographers will turn up to a volume or an LED wall and be told this is what you're shooting and this has been decided because we saw a documentary on the Mandalorian, and why can't you make it look like that? And I think that's really sad because I had a lot of say in what went on that screen. And in fact, I was the loudest voice in the room. And Warwick, I'm a bit of a douchebag when it comes to not agreeing to do things on a wall if they want to look great. You know what I mean? So I have been a little bit of a squeaky wheel when I've seen something and it's come across my desk. Like on the creator, this Gareth Edwards thing I just did. We were going to do three things on a volume. And the third thing, I just didn't think it was right. And I said it wasn't going to look right on a volume. And all the production plan was to go onto the volume, and it was budgeted for, and there were people hired already. And I said I didn't think it was a good idea. And so we pulled it off the volume and shot it a different way. And so sometimes you've got to be that squeaky wheel. And that's why I guess the importance of talking to cinematographers primarily and designers today is that hopefully to empower cinematographers and designers to be that squeaky wheel. That if it's not going to look amazing, it's got to look better than reality. It's going to look as good as, if not better. If it doesn't, then there's no point in doing it. Particularly when you've got this incredible volume in Melbourne. I mean, that NAD volume, I don't know if anyone's seen that, but that's the best one that exists in the world right now. And so that's why I think it's really important that Victorians, cinematographers and designers fully embrace it, because it's an incredible gift to have down there right now.
The necessity for us to become the masters of the technology, not the technology to become masters of us. We talked about, when to use the volume, when's the right time to use it. Well, and that comes back to pre-production, doesn't it, really?
It 100% does, but it also comes to knowledge as well, Brent. Where you know, cinematographers generally have only really we haven't really had to evolve much when it comes to technology. I don't know if you agree or disagree on that. Like, effectively, we are doing the same today that we did 50 years ago. The difference is we don't maybe have a light emitter anymore. We're using LEDs that don't need gels anymore, but effectively it's the same job. And whereas every other department, like post-production particularly, has evolved so quickly. And so it's generally those departments that are in that mode of evolving quickly that are the ones that commandeer the technology. And quite rightly, because they're the most experienced. You know, the post-production people are the ones that use the computers. So, you know, it's the design departments that have been using SketchUp and design programs that will then transfer over into Unreal. So that's good from a design perspective. And as I said before, post-production also do that. But that leaves us as cinematographers in the lurch. It means all our technology is being controlled by different departments. And this was the push that I made with Tomas on Dune, that everyone posthumously, nobody, when I pushed for Tomas early, understood the rationale, but post that, everybody understood because they saw the power of having that knowledge in your department. So what I'm suggesting to young cinematographers is that a fantastic way to learn cinematography is to also learn Unreal. Because as you'll see with this video that we're going to show, and this is Tomas controlling it, not me, by the way, and I'll just put my hand up and say I am crap at technology. Like, the fact that I'm even talking to you on Zoom right now is a bloody miracle. But what I do recognize is the fact that this technology is so important that it's important that we at least understand what it is we don't know, so that we can employ people or get people in, or basically we have to shift. Cinematographers are in the middle of a shift. We have to shift and we have to learn. And as filmmakers, we need to evolve big time in the next few years, because there is some serious technology coming down the pike that we need to be ahead of. If we don't, we're going to be left out.
Absolutely. I just wanted to bring Tomas in and just, from his perspective, just have a bit of a chat about, his role and it's kind of it's almost like a new part of the department, isn't it? Like having somebody like him there that's being able to coordinate with you and work closely with you to get that visual and that vision on the screen.
It 100% is, and you definitely, I'd love to hear from Tomas in that sense, because Tomas trained as a cinematographer, but learned Unreal as a secondary thing, which was perfect for me on that film. So, because he could bring his skill as a cinematographer, and then transfer it over to a computer cinematography world.
So what I like about Unreal is that you can do basically like anything. And I learned Unreal while there was COVID. So I was logged in and I spent all my time learning it. And my girlfriend just asked me like what I'm going to use Unreal for. And I just kept telling her that I like doing it because it has so much potential. And at one point, Greg just looked for an assistant for Dune. So I hopped on it, of course, like who wouldn't? And I really like the idea as well to just have the opportunity to work on something big and to experiment. And I think what I've seen on Dune is that Greg has a really, really strong, like using Unreal and using Unreal gives Greg control over what is happening on set a little bit more than he would without Unreal. And I was saying that on the production of Dune, all the different departments have seen that as well. And all the departments just started to get involved into pre-production of each scene and each shot, so that everyone understands like what's happening on each of these locations. And So like we had, I think we started off with sound parts, like some normal, like simple sound parts for the studio where we shot Dune. And then we started to move, as Greg has seen, that it's working pretty well, and there's some useful data that we can get out of Unreal. We just started to move to more advanced stuff. And by the end of June, we experimented with loads of things. So at the end of the show, I just started to just gather all the experience and start to categorize them so that we know like what is possible and what we can do in an efficient way and what we can't at the moment. And there even like since the show, there has been like loads of progress in Unreal. So I need to learn loads of stuff still from day to day because technology is evolving so quickly. So I think our relationship with Greg, I think it's, from his point, it's good because I'm always trying to keep up with technology from the Unreal side. And it's good for me because I can learn from Greig Fraser.
Yeah. Get your own Academy Award.
It's a very it's a very good program. I'm not employed by Epic, by the way, so I'm not trying to sell anyone because it's a free program. But what I can tell is that for us on Dune, which was a relatively high end production, it was so useful for various things. But even if I was learning cinematography right now, I remember that to get onto a set, I had to get onto a set with multiple electricians, multiple grips, big set pieces. I was learning on the fly. Like I was learning in front of hundreds of people whenever you were on a big set. Whereas in Unreal, you could get on a big set and learn virtually in the comfort of your own home, really. Is it worth, tell me, Brett, is it worth just playing the video? And I'll maybe talk a little bit over it. There's a lot of really good questions that I'm reading in Q&As right now.
Okay.
All right, so for clarification, we've got a set that you found on the marketplace, which was, and you put it in the stage 1 of BAFTA Games, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay, good. And that background that you've got there is not necessarily the LED wall, could be the LED wall, right?
Yes. So now this is only the backdrop now.
All right. So just for interest's sake, why don't you make that backdrop blue so we can see that outside the windows? All right, cool. So I've asked you already in advance to put those space lights in. They're just a random. How many space lights are there approximately? Between 70 and 80. All right, perfect. All right, so let's go inside, please. I've also asked you just in advance to put some HMIs. Can you show us those HMIs outside the window? Yeah, okay. So you've got a number of HMIs there. And what how are those? Are they 18Ks?
They are around 18Ks, maybe a little bit more. It's really hard to define because there's no scientific measurements for that.
There's going to be, I think Epic are working on a scientific measurement to try and make sure that they match inside the engine. Okay, so looking at a wide shot.
They're working. Any day now, we're going to have an 18K that reacts like an 18K. These are all just simulations in the engine. But what's really important to understand is that they are simulations, but they're very, very good simulations.
Let's look at seeing what everything does. Can you turn off the tungsten lights inside, please, just so I can see how much ambience is bouncing around? No, cool. Let's leave them off, and we'll work with them off, actually. Yeah. So what I'd love to be able to do is to find me a close-up, please, of the person in the front row. So let's go face the other way, put on a slightly longer lens, and find a longer lens shot on him or her. Like this one? There you go. That's it. That's great angle there. Yep. Perfect. Okay, so now, just so I can see what it's doing, can you flash the space lights, all the space lights on and off, please? And space lights on and off? Yes. Okay, so they're doing very little, aren't they? Yes. And off? This is off. Sitting outside the window. Yes, is that? Yeah. Great. Can you bring the space lights lower then? Sure. As I'm lowering them, they will go into the spotlights where. Yeah. Okay. Turn off the spotlights for a sec, please. Yeah. Okay, great. So keep dropping them down lower, please. Okay, hold them there.
From these programs is that being able to do this in a pre-production environment to understand potentially how high your lights might need to be. It won't replace doing it for real ever, but what it will do is it'll actually be able to sort of give you an idea of how many lights you need, or what the diffusion is, or what the angle should be. So these sessions have been edited a little bit. So it's important to know that we've cut the meat out of these sessions. But for example, having moved that line of Arimaxes, that would have taken half a day to have gone from 20 feet away from the windows to 8 feet away from the windows. So to have made that assessment now means that we save half a day of 8 electricians, for example. I don't know. I'm not an expert at rigging. So also the other thing it will give you is it will give the director and you an idea of what this set's going to look like before you even put a light up, or before you even rent a light. So being able to have this session information it's super useful.
One a bit more efficiently. I think you should add another light. I think you should put another 18K out there. Okay. Can you show me what that looks like in the wide shot? Because it might be that we only be used that light for the close up on her and not for the wide shot. Yeah, it's too much back there. It's like she's being lit. Well, that's okay. So we won't use that light for the wide shot, but we'll use it for her close up. Okay, so go back to that close up if you don't mind. Let's look at a light above the camera. Get a bit of extra detail into that side of her face. Cool. Okay. So what level is that at right now?
It's on unit 1.
Unit 1. Okay, so can you go to point 2? And then show me 0. Okay, point 2 is good. Okay, so let's find another couple of shots, please. I think what's important though is that when we get back there, we make the lighting changes that we need to for that lens, which is you turn off the eye light, the skip bounce. Yes, maybe you don't turn off the skip bounce. Let me see the skip bounce on and off. Off. On. Yeah, okay. So it's a little bit too much, I think, for the wide, but I think let's modify it slightly. Can you make the changes for each lens? So when we go back to each lens, the light comes on?
Okay, so right now, on the first one, there is no skip bounce. On the second one, there is skip bounce. And on the third one, we can choose if we want skip bounce or not.
Okay. Can I don't know, this might take a little
Things at this point. Thanks, Grant, if you could mute that. But keep playing it, perhaps. Is that the power of this is not only just pre-production, and it's not just if you're lighting a church inside of a studio. It's also filmmaking for the future, because there are going to be films made in Unreal. Like, the quality is so high now of this technology, and I know this is to be the case because I am in the process of making one with a prominent filmmaker who is aiming to do an entire film in Unreal. So I know this is going to happen. Now, this set is off the marketplace, and it was a freebie, right, to us. Like, it was a cheap set that we just pulled in.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so it's just an experimental set that we pulled in just to play with. But when you give this tool to experienced production designers who can really design it with any texture they want to put in there, they can find any texture they want. They don't have to go and source it from the local hardware store. They can find it on the marketplace. And then when you lens it, so you put the right filmmakers, which is the filmmakers who are making films, and you give them these tools. We're going to be making films in this technology in the future, and they're going to be feature films, and they're going to be really important. And so I think part of the importance, part of the rationale of having this discussion today is not only talking about the volume in the Docklands, although that is a big element, it's also making sure that we stay, as I said before, at the forefront of the technology, so that when it comes around, we are trained and willing to be the cinematographers on a film. And it is not, we're basically keeping our jobs, but keeping our eye on the show. So it's understanding that this is a thing that we need to master and understand. Thanks, Brent.
Ones you drop a little bit at an angle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just push into the room more.
The second line as well? Second row?
Yeah, a little bit.
I would put a diffusion up there and not just space lights, not undiffused space lights, if I was doing this for real. The reason that we're not doing that is because currently diffusion is not really working in Unreal, and because Unreal works with sources and not diffusion. So that will change, but right now we're using space lights to kind of mimic soft light.
Pull back a little bit. Let me see the front of the counter.
We have put this on the volume, just for interest's sake. So we're lighting the foreground separately to the background. So the first thing I'd do here is I would put, I'd set up some lenses, as I'm doing now. So I'm arranging some lenses. And if I was working with a director on this, on a scene, I'd sit here and work with the director. So we'd come up with what the scene might be and what the angles might be. And we can either do that. I was just reading some of the questions, how we would actually do that. We could do that with the director in this program. We could do it in the goggles as well. So we could get into the goggles and we could fly around the set, and we could stand in the set with a lens and previs this. But in this case, I'm just moving Tomas through the scene and getting him set up these lenses.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that these setups work in the VR goggles as well.
They do, yeah. But we didn't do that. It's really interesting. Some people work really well in the goggles and some people don't. I know some people get seasick in them and some people can't manage it. For me, I love that sense, that spatial awareness where, I put the goggles on and I can turn around and see what's behind me, how far back I can walk. It allows that ability to be able to kind of be in the space.
Let's put a street light in there as well. What street lights do you?
I don't know how relevant what I was saying is. But Alessi asked about should we be starting to learn Unreal, and my instinct is yes, you should start to learn Unreal. If you have the time to learn Unreal and you have the inclination, you should learn Unreal. I don't know how important it is to be an expert at Unreal. I think that's a job into itself. Like it's like any skill, you can become an expert in it, and you'll be, remunerated really well. But my take on it is a little bit like photography in Photoshop, or being a normal human and learning how to work Microsoft Word. Like I think everybody in the world needs to learn how to use Word to some degree, right? And I think anyone that involves with photography or image making needs to know a bit about Photoshop. And I think the same is the case with Unreal. I think filmmakers need to have an understanding of Unreal. Do you agree, Tomas?
100%, Greg.
So Rachel Steger asked about working with hard light in a volume or sticking to soft light. The short answer is yes, soft light works better in a volume. The long answer is you can use hard light, but you've got to realize that the LED panels themselves can't put out hard light. It's not what they do. So if you're expecting, you can obviously set an HMI up and you can set up spotlights on the volume, but it's not just the light that hits the subjects. Like, if you're filming me, yes, you can give me a backlight with an HMI, but then when you come out wide, that same HMI should be covering a volume that's 50 foot wide, and invariably it won't. You'll end up with multiple shadows. So if you use a hard light, I always say like they need to be like flashes of hard light or patches of hard light. Lewis Arnett talked about the sensor size. Can we talk about the sensor size in relation to the volume? On Mandalorian, we found that in order to get the best results, the bigger the sensor size was, the faster the focus fall off was, which meant that we could put the subjects closer to the wall, closer to the volume wall, and not have moire. So we found that the bigger sensor and the anamorphic lenses were better for that. Whenever we tested spherical lenses, I always felt like the wall started to feel like a two-dimensional translite. Like I couldn't really get three-dimensionality out of it. So I would always try and aim for a bigger sensor, but it's not the be-all and end-all, and I think what's important is that people do their own testing. Katie, hi Katie. All right. How are you part of the background design process? Is this with the production designer too? I would say you are involved with the background the same way that you involve with the background on any normal shoot. So if the designer is presenting a design, let's say it's a house with no windows. This is a perfect example, or a set with no windows and no lighting operation. You have every right as the VP to in that meeting to say, well, how are we going to light this? There's no windows, there's no opportunities for light. So you have the ability and the responsibility actually to play a part of that. And the same would apply with the backgrounds for something like this. If the designer and the director want a certain location and want it to look a certain way, you then would chime in the same way that you would chime in on any set. And knowing though that the LED volume has limitations in that the panels are effectively soft and they're not very powerful, not very punchy. So if you understand what the limitations of the LED volume are, then you can better advise the designer director what is the best subjects to be putting on there. And yeah, you should be involved in the lighting of it. In the same way, like the designer designs it with their team, you come in and you light it with your team. It's exactly the same process. And that's the misconception that I'm hearing a lot, that people think it's some weird new thing they don't understand. Whereas it's exactly the same process. It's just adding in a new technology to it.
Okay, perfect. So that's working. So I think that's a good, well, that's a bit dark out there. Yeah. I think what's going on there? Can we maybe increase the exposure or increase the level of the light, street lights? Of course. And right now it's on 400 units. So let me just switch that to 600. Yep. Okay, so if I was suggesting to the art department how to help join these together, I would say they definitely need to add road here, whatever the tarmac bitumen look is. You could say this area is all open, so perhaps you actually add road here with some lines and perhaps a street light here or a prop here, so that you've got, or a wall there, something to help join that together. So something simple and non-constructed, but just a floor-based, like a floor-based piece of art department. And I think that'll help join those things together. Because that way it means that the first pieces of 3D will be a building on this wall, and whatever building that is that the production designer decides that wants to be in 3D, it'll be on that wall. And I think that'll line up nicely. Can you put a character in there? We're going to start looking at what the light does to the close-ups.
Sure. Okay, that's the last set.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that like Epic is working on some digital prints for virtual LED panels as well, so that you could build a physically accurate wall inside Unreal and previous what the LED wall is going to show on the day. I think that's really important because right now all the backgrounds that we are emulating and simulating on the walls, and you can see in here as well, for example, are just like textures on a 3D geometry. But later on in the future, we will be able to just put down cameras as you would put down cameras in real life, and you will be able to just move stuff around on the LED wall as well. So you can just take like control of that as well.
And I think having that information, even though it's not active right now, like having that information means, again, when it becomes active, we can be asking for that for in order to be able to lead our directors. Like if we know enough about the technology that we can lead the directors down the correct creative path, I think that's really important, rather than them being led down a path by production or, like it's important that we allow it. Because one thing I'll say, and this is, I don't want to talk too much over this scene because I really like the way that this scene, you're putting the background in there now. Like one thing that volume shooting does is it brings the departments together a lot more tightly. Like before there was a lot more of a kind of delineation between design, DP, post, and all the technology. Whereas now there's a lot more hand in glove that goes along. Like we need a very close working relationship with VFX and a very close working relationship with the guys and girls that do the technology, like run the wall. Like we need to have a really strong knowledge of all that. We don't need to know how to do it, but we need to understand that there's a big crossover. So I think the more we can understand, the better. So what we're doing here, by the way, is we're putting trees outside this set, as you can sort of see. So we put a forest on the wall, and now we're adding some trees in the mid-ground to sort of break up the background a bit.
Okay, perfect. Let's start adding some HMI light in there. Okay, I don't want too much. I don't want too much sun because it's going to be just little pockets of it, like here. Nothing on the people. Maybe down this on the ground here. Just very small. I reckon use a small HMI, and then do something back here in the doorway as well. Okay. I think the light from the screen is working really well. Yeah. Is the camera portal that we cut a hole in the wall, is that creating a lighting problem? Should we put up a solid there to block? Yeah, and you're taking that wall out now. Can you put a solid, let me just annotate. Can you put a 12 by 20 here? Just to stop any light spill getting in there? Sure. What do you think about this, Greg? I think it's working well. Yep, I think it's working well. Okay. Will you go and have a look, please, at the close-up of the person in the doorway? Sure. So I didn't put any lights in here yet. It's okay. I quite like it as it is. I'm going to add a little bit of an eye light. Just the tiniest piece of eye light. Okay, from above. Actually, don't do it directly above camera. Do it sort of above her. So not just above the camera. Maybe put a foot above the camera. Yeah, what level is it sitting at right now? 0.1. 0.1? Yeah. Can you do like 0.02? 0.02. Okay. That's better. Now, let's get back to that wide shot again. I want to assess how important this volume is and how much of impact it has in this scene. Okay. So show me the top light on and off again. Okay, perfect. Now show me the wall off, please. The top light on. There's also the spotlight that we put in. The HMIs? Yes. Yeah, that's okay. So turn off the top light for me, please. So that's the light from the spotlights only? Yes. Perfect. Now put the top lights on. Okay, now put the backlight on, please. The wall. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's showing us what the wall light's doing. Now, just for fun, can you make that area that we're seeing through that fence, through the hole, blue, if we like, rotoscope that, but only the area we're seeing, not the area left and right, so it doesn't affect the lighting. Okay, good. So that's just blue screen, right? Yes. Okay, and show me that from outside, just so I can see the size of it. Okay, good. All right, perfect. So if we ever need to go to a blue screen, we don't need a small blue.
When we recorded it, right, Tomas?
Yes, it's much more contrast. Yeah,
it's much more contrasty and much darker. So we shouldn't necessarily use these as very accurate. So we can definitely talk over these. These are examples of just experimenting with lighting on metahumans, and this is where I think there's real value for student. If I was a photography student learning how to light people, knowing this on Unreal is invaluable because you can put a light anywhere and figure out what it does. Like you can move it around, you can put it up, and it doesn't involve any other crew except for yourself. So even learning the basics of Unreal, which is this, to move lights around, and to realize what light looks like above the camera, below the camera, left and right, just as a learning tool, I think is incredible. Even I love using it. I've done this multiple times now with real people, but I love just experimenting with finding out what the difference between a light, a foot back or a foot forward is. How much into their eye do you get to make them look sinister? Like, how do you create a noir look versus a high key look? It's a super interesting, fun experiment. So, I just want to answer some more questions. So Katie has asked, she can clarify her earlier question. Can you describe your process in the background design? Who are you working with? So I am working with, and this is a part of the discussion where Tomas comes into it, is in the past, I've worked with the virtual art department. So I've worked with people who sit in the art department that work directly for, like Mandalorian, they work directly for the production designer, which is a great thing, by the way, because it means that the right people are working for the right people at that point in time. They're not working for an outside company. They're not working for, a previous company. They're not working for any other company. They're working directly for the designer. And as we know, the designer has to be respected, in their job, and they have to be allowed to do their job with the director in order for us to have the best things to shoot. So on Mandalorian, we worked with a VAD from that worked for the production designer. On Batman and the Creator, we worked with a VAD that was working with ILM because there wasn't a VAD set up to that film. So ILM had their own VAD set up, and so I worked directly with them. So the point of having someone like Tomas or that role is that person now sits in our department, and they can be in charge of lighting a set that's been designed by the virtual art department, if that makes sense. So it's not about creating a power play. It's about putting control back into our hands and keeping control for some things. And so to have someone like Tomas who works directly for the cinematographer to light a set that's been designed for the by the production designer, it means that the gaffer can deal directly with Tomas. He can find out exactly what the thought is in the lighting about the concepts. The grip they can see how much space they have above the set to rid things, or it's a really good tool to act as a sensor for all of our departments. And even on Dune Part 2, what we found is Tomas became the go-to guy for the stunt department. So when they needed to see where our cranes were out in the desert, which, by the way, we were doing 6 months before we went out there. So we needed to know exactly what the sun was doing, exactly what the rocks look like. So we were planning when we were in Budapest and shooting when we were in Jordan. But the stunt department will come out, he'd come out and sit with them and say, okay, if I need to do a stunt thing that they do, a fall or a hit or whatever they do, how big crane they need to do that, how far away from that can they get? And so they were working closely with Tomas. So effectively Tomas's role became a center for production. And then another thing that Tomas was able to do was, on Dune Part 2, we have quite a complicated scene where it takes place over 7 different locations, but it's supposed to be one location. And he was able to, through photogrammetry, which we'll see a little bit later, tell us exactly when shadows emerged, or when someone was backlit, or when the lighting was right. And we were able to do it from Budapest, even though it was in Jordan. We didn't have to stand on the location of the compass and a program. We were able to do it remotely. So it gives us options and it gives us control, which I think is really important. Sarah Fraser just asked, what specifically makes the volume of the Docklands the best in the world at the moment? It is the biggest, which I think is really important, because one of the problems I think that smaller volumes have is that it starts to feel two-dimensional, and it's hard to make the background feel like it's not just a trans light. So the further away the background is, the better off the results are going to be. It's got the highest walls and it's got a pit, so you can get down low. Part of the issue that I have with volume work at the moment is it's all very two-dimensional, as in it's on a flat surface. Whereas if you've got a pit, you can design stairs coming up into an area. You can shoot from the pit looking up. It's just been designed with all of the problems that we've had in the past in mind, and they've built the best volume that exists in the world. And I mean, I would dearly love to shoot on it because I think it's an incredible space.
And Greg, can I add to the metahuman topic?
Yeah.
So I think this lighting setup is like testing lighting on these metahumans is something that's probably going to be more and more relevant in the future. Like I just did some tasks with some of my friends. I scanned their face, and I think that's something where probably we could use lighting as well. Is that if you would have a scan of the talent beforehand, then you could test like different lighting setups on their face, so you already know what looks good on them and what doesn't look good on them. So you can kind of approach it from this side as well.
I think that's a really interesting topic because it's that's one of the dreams that I would have, because invariably you have a hair and makeup test that you get to look at an actor, and you don't get to spend 3 days with them just experimenting and playing like you would like to. But in Unreal, you could spend 3 days if you had a scan of them. But the controversy is now that with the actors striking is that these scans are going to get harder and harder to get, or they're going to not want to be scanned. Actors are not going to want to get scanned. Like it's a bit controversial at the moment, but yeah, it's a super cool idea if you can, experiment with different lighting on your lead actors without them, complaining or the first AD telling you got to move on. Let's have a look. Are there any questions from there while we're watching this?
Hi, Greg. I just was wondering how this differs from DOPs who've worked on animations like Caleb Deschanel on The Lion King and Roger Deakins on WALL-E and other films like that. Do the same techniques translate to what you're talking about here?
Yeah, they do, and they're all part of a bigger understanding about our jobs. So whilst it's not, Roger didn't work on this with this technology for WALL-E. He didn't use Unreal. He worked with animators, and Caleb didn't work with Unreal either for The Lion King. But what Caleb did work on, and we crossed over with The Lion King. So Mandalorian and Lion King were in the same space because of Favreau. John was doing, and so what they had developed quite smartly was the fact that what John wanted to do was to make sure that when he shot The Lion King, he shot it with real cinematographers, real focus pullers, real grips, and real artisans. Like he didn't want a computer with ones and zeros deciding when to do a pull focus. Like he wanted a focus puller and a grip to push in on the lead actor, which is a lion, right? So where I'll give John full credit for being really respectful of that job. He understood that if you suddenly take away the role of a cinematographer and a focus puller and a grip, in that you end up with something that looks like a robot made it. So it's very related. It's not, the technology wasn't directly the same, like with 3D and conceptive, and it's all related. So having the knowledge as cinematographers means that we're at the forefront, if that makes sense. Like we're not being led by the hand saying, come with us, you're going to shoot something in Unreal. You're saying, here's how I want to do it in Unreal. And so I think it's very important. And I know it's hard. As I get older too, I start to learn. It's really hard to learn stuff. I don't know what it is. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? Old dogs and stuff. But I know that it's so important because it's the future and it's the technology. So, yeah.
So I just wanted to add, like, as a cinematographer, if you learn Unreal, I think the benefits are that you can just think more freely. So, for example, like there was a case with Greg where we had a scene in an exterior place, and Greg just wanted like a big solid, like over like a 40 meters by 40 meters, a solid behind the actor. So I think the thinking in a way where you can do like anything as a cinematographer in a virtual space like Unreal for something that's going to be final, I think is something that like really inspiring. Yeah.
When you start to light in Unreal, it can become a little bit frustrating because, like, as you heard there, we were talking about what level is that light at, and Tomas said 1. Like, well, what's 1 in our world? Like, what's a 1? Like, is it T6? What's the level of it? So some things can become frustrating, and also the fact that we don't have currently HMIs. They're spotlights or their bulbs or their, that can be a little bit frustrating. But the flip side of that is what Tomas just pointed out, is that you can light things through sets. Like, perfect example is I'm working on something at the moment where, there's 2 people at a bar, and I want to uplight them from the bar, but I don't want the bar to be a light source. So what you can do is you can move the light into the bar and make the bar, the surface of the bar, transparent to the light, but not transparent to the viewer. So the light can come through the bar, but the camera sees no light. So it's like the perfect world where you're hiding a light inside a bar, but there's no. So there's so many advantages of Unreal that if you learn all those, again, it's a very powerful tool. But not only just that, it's not only in 3D, it's also how do you then translate back to a 2D world where you're shooting on a real volume? And that's where, if you understand the whole process, then you can understand, all right, well, you've got these actors in real life and you've got this activity going on in the background. So, yeah, you can start changing your thinking a little bit.
Thomas, Greg, I just had a question about how you're seeing this translate to, because obviously a lot of stuff you've shown is very high-end, big budget stuff. How are you seeing it translating to an indie world? Is that mainly pre-prod, or are you seeing the volume technology coming into a lower budget feature work as well?
Well, listen, everything I do, even though I know it sounds like a bit of a joke that I'm like, I think like a small film when I make a big film, right? Because you can look at Dune or Batman and go, it's ridiculous. It's not a small film, and it's not. But the value is for independent filmmakers more than anyone else, because, like I said, you could make the film in your bedroom with 2 people, 3 people. You don't need 100 people. Like, if you've got an amazingly beautiful set in Unreal, you don't need 100 people to location to get in there and set it up. So I think that this is a tool for independent filmmakers as much as it is anything. You're right, though. Getting onto a volume is expensive. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a lot of people, and it's big, and it's not for the faint of heart. So to that point, if you're a first-time DP or a second-time DP or a young DP, and you're on a volume, you don't want to screw it up. So you want to do as much prep work in advance, thinking about all the chess moves that can be played in advance. Normally, we would do that in pre-production. We'd sit there in our office or at home or in the car going, okay, what happens if it's overcast? Okay, what happens if my gaffer's sick that day and they've all got food poisoning and I'm having to deal with just a dim... Like, you think about all of those factors about what happens if, and you invariably try and get lights offset just in case the director asks for something else. Or now with this process, you can do that, and you can do it in a far more educated way. So, it's a real luxury for me that I had someone like Tomas helping me with this. Whereas if I was an independent younger filmmaker, I would be saying to myself, "You've got to learn Unreal, dude, so you can be doing it yourself." When production will not be able to afford someone like Tomas. So, and also the volume shooting, I think it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. And I think it's going to get more and more prevalent if these stages stay up. And I think I'm seeing a bit of unfortunately, there's not as many stages up as there was. And if the stages are being run with bigger productions, I think the in-between times, smaller productions can slide in there, and they can slide in as education opportunities. They can slide in as for commercials. They can slide in for fashion shoots, for stills. I mean, the dream that I had when we did Mandalorian was that right now I'd be talking to a group of student filmmakers who are about to do their student films on the volume because they're so abundant and everybody uses them whenever they want. So, yeah. It's not quite the dream, but that's the idea.
Hi, Greg and Tomas. I come from the games industry, and I'm very fascinated to see the application of real-time game tools in the film industry. My question is, do you think there's something that the games industry can actually learn from the film industry in regards to lighting those virtual locations much in the same way that you would a set with real lighting setups, as opposed to something that would only make sense for the virtual space?
1,000,000%. And in fact, again, this is where I'm working with a gaming company or two at the moment, because what happens is in the past, it's been gaming over here, films over here, and they're slowly coming together, and Unreal is the conduit for those things. And gaming generally hasn't been aesthetically very pleasing, if you kind of want my honest opinion. I'm not a gamer, but there's only been a couple of examples in the last few years where you can say that's beautiful gaming. You know, I mean, The Last of Us did some incredible cinematic work, and there's been some other games that have had some beautiful cinematic examples in them. But up to now, I wouldn't have said that games were particularly aesthetically high end. You know what I mean? Maybe you disagree and tell me if you do. I'm happy to debate this, but right now, I think when you start to get artists with a cinematography or a film background, and they cross over into gaming, and then gaming crosses over into film, I think we're going to see a really interesting future where we're going to find some beautiful gaming going forward. Like, that's why I used those examples before that were all shot in Unreal. I think you can have games. You can be playing a game that's as beautiful as a Steven Spielberg film. You know, I think you can be in a world that's been lit as beautifully.
Makes sense. The only thing I would really push back against is I agree in the sense of if you're trying to go for a photorealistic look, you'd want to approach things like you would a film. I would say with games, you have the opportunity to be very stylized, and I think that kind of brings with it its own set of skills and ways of creating that kind of like visual look, as opposed to if you were specifically trying to emulate films.
So this is where I reckon we could learn from that. Like the film industry can learn from that. And you're 100% right, because you're able to create styles and looks and worlds that we've never been able to create before, because cameras don't look like that, humans don't look like that, locations don't look like that. So I agree. I think that there's a place for, and this is why it's so exciting, and this is why going forward there's going to be films made that are going to be inspired by the worlds that games can create, that gaming can educate filmmakers. But I would, and again, this is where we can debate it until the blue, but I would discuss that. Well, you'll never watch a movie that's a first-person shooter ever. Like one of these games that Tomas and I were being shown through that we're working on at the moment. They were showing us through the game. They're flying through these spaces, and we're like, "Whoa, man, what's going on?" Like, films won't be made like that. Drama won't be made like that, because I get nothing personally as a viewer out of watching you play a video game. You know what I mean? Like, so whereas I get a lot out of you as a filmmaker taking you through the space and taking you through your journey in that game. So that's where I think gaming and film are going to come together, and it's going to become an interesting little marriage. It won't replace gaming, it won't replace film. It'll just be, I think both will inspire each other, and it's a very exciting prospect, actually.
Thank you. I look forward to it, and the future looks bright.
Say again?
saying the future looks bright in regards to films and games coming more together.
Oh yeah. It does. And this is where I think this is why I'm so passionate with Brent about talking to everybody in Melbourne, is because I know the skill level in Melbourne, I know the skill base in Melbourne, and I know the passion in Melbourne. And so I can see right now there's a bit of a I don't know, a bit of a wave that's hit Victoria at the moment with NAD being there and the opportunity to combine these things together. And it would not surprise me if a new wave of filmmaking emerged from Melbourne, and I hope to see it, because I know the skill level there. I mean, I know so many people there that are so talented.
I just wanted to add, Greg, that at the end of the video that we sent, there's maybe a good practice for like an easy practice for using Unreal on the real shoots, like the sound pass thing with photogrammetry.
Did you want to show that? Maybe we should show the last two sections, right? The desert rocks and the studio.
Let's just, as an example, from this angle, you can see some colours down there. Just show us a time of day animation here, please. Okay, so do me a favour, can you come 3/4 rather than being straight down? It's very hard to see. It's very hard to see height and depth and all that stuff when you're looking straight down.
Some commentary to this. On Dune Part 2, we were shooting in Jordan at the end of our shoot in Budapest. So we scouted Jordan in March, let's say, in April, and we were going to shoot there in October. So we had all these locations that we had scouted, that we had photogrammetry with a drone that we needed to plan for, and then sometimes script changes came in and we had to review the location again and we had to go through photos, but this was a really good planning example. And going back to the question about how this relates to independent film, like doing a photogrammetry of a particular area, let's say you've got a scene in a movie that's 25 pages or something. The photogrammetry and area is not that complicated. I mean, this was just drone work, wasn't it, Tomas? Like, I think this was a drone went out there for 3 or 4 hours to do this entire area, and was able to effectively capture and record this location. And so imagine that you were able to scout a location but instead of standing there in the desert talking about what the 25 pages are, you were able to plan for it in the office and able to come back and sort of know, where things parked, what size crane you need, can the shot be got with a 100-ton crane, and where can you park it? And if all those things can be done in the office, as opposed to, let's say, the middle of the desert, you're instantly going to be saving time and a lot more. It doesn't replace a scout and it doesn't replace a compass. So it's not a magic bullet for any of those things. Like, you still need to stand there with the sun path and go, okay, the sun sets there and the sun rises there. But what it allows is you to have more confidence in your ability to know when the shadows fall at a certain place at a certain time. And again, it's that fact that you can give the first AD or exact measurements of time. So this is a really good example, as Tomas just pointed out, of a very practical, real-world instance of how things are planned, when people get in light. Like, when does she start looking good? Like, when is she backlit? What point in time is she backlit? And how long is she backlit for? And like, at what point do you allow it to shoot that direction? So there are things that you can sort of look at that give you that control. And there are programs that you can I was out there photogrammetering with my iPhone. I was LiDARing certain scenes with the iPhone. So I don't know. It's a pretty interesting world. I'll answer some questions while you're doing that. Unreal from Lee Schilling. Unreal is already free, but you think we'll see enough investment in this technology that the hardware will become accessible to smaller productions too. I'm imagining, Lee, you're talking about the hardware being LED walls, right? That's what I imagine you're talking about. Yes, I do think it's going to become more accessible. And I think that when people start understanding how to use the technology, and they use it in a successful way, I think it'll be more and more used. The problem has become, and let me be a little bit frank, unfortunately, is that when productions use a volume and it doesn't look good, or it isn't successful, then it gives it a bit of a bad rap. And then producers and studios start to go, well, hang on, we're paying for pre-production, we're paying for the DP to come on early to light these scenes, we're paying for all this infrastructure, and then we're just changing it all in post anyway. Like, that's when it starts to fail. There was a question earlier about an opera, and let me find it because it was a good question. It's been Michael Easter. It's been said shooting virtual production is like shooting an opera. Rehearsals are done, the sets are complete, and there's a mindset that we can't fix it in post. How does it affect your pre-production, the time on set, and the experience of shooting? In that regard, you can do a little bit of post, but if you start changing out the background, like it's a blue screen, then you've broken it. You've failed. I would start to look at it like a normal shoot. I would say you go to a location and you know that you're either going to make some touch-ups to the background in the location, but you do all the pre-production early. Like, you go to the location, you block it with the director, the designer addresses it. You know, like, in that regard, it's a real set. So if you start thinking about a virtual production like a volume, like a real set, you have to do all the pre-production work in the same way that you would on a real shoot, on a normal shoot, not a real shoot, a normal shoot. You would do all the pre-production and you would make sure that all your ducks are in a row. If, for example, you're shooting a period piece and then you've got the art center spire in the background coming out of the backgrounds, then yeah, you've got to paint it out. And so it's the same on virtual production. If you're doing small fixtures, then it's one thing. But if you're changing it completely, then you've failed. The production's failed. You as a team, I think, have failed. It does happen though, because stories change and scripts change. So Tomas, you show us to say this is the model that Tomas made quickly for Origo, which is a studio that we shot Dune Part 2 at. And you did this with a bit of photogrammetry and a little bit of Google Earth, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So I use the first month of June Part 2. I used the Google Maps data from Google Maps. I was able to just take out the 3D data from Google Maps and use it inside Unreal. So once I put it into Unreal, I just started to recreate it with 3D objects inside Unreal and started to go out into the exterior of the stages and started to measure if the shadows were in the correct place at the correct time. So I just started to double check back so that the data I have is correct. So the thing what you can see right now is like a modified version of the Google Maps data. So it represents the accurate timing more.
Yeah. The important thing to point out is that if your project is quite simple, like, again, this is great for light, to knowing where the shadows are, okay? To do all this to stop you from getting your compass out, from pointing to a sunrise and a sunset, it's a bit of an overkill. Like, you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't design a location just to know where the sun's going to rise and where it's going to be at 11 o'clock. So it doesn't make sense if you're going to use it twice or three times on a shoot. But if you're in a location for a long time and you need to know exactly when the shadow is going to creep across this area, there are a couple of ways that you can do this. You can stand there and do a sun path, photograph it. You can stand there with a phone and be approximately, it's going to hit this point at around 9 o'clock. Or you can do all of them, or you can do this. And this becomes a lot more precise. And the value in this is, again, it's a little bit geeky for a few little shots, but when we use this tool so often, because every single set we had that was outside, we had to know exactly when it was shootable and when the sun was off it. We had to know what dimension, what angle to build it at. Like, we could test building it southwest, how long we would get inside this location if it was the interior for an exterior build. We could find out where the sun would go. Like, it just took away so much planning time. And I think that what we were able to show production was that the value of Tomas's role, which had never existed before on a film, could save them so much time and so much money. So that's always the challenge, isn't it? You're saying to production who have never hired a person like Tomas before, hey, we need to hire this person, and this is what we think they can give you. I mean, invariably, producers don't like to do that because they don't understand it. And so the producers now that have seen this whole experience, I think will, if we asked them again, would say, yeah, absolutely. We know what Tomas's, his value to the production is. Are there any other questions from there, Brent?
It's from here. Yeah, got one question here. Can you please talk about shooting off speed on volumes? Are there traps or concern off speed? So are there concerns in shooting in slow motion, for example?
Yeah, because it's a sync discussion. It's a sync issue. And this is, somebody asked that question before actually about sync, and Pete, yeah. The problem is you've got to sync the cameras to the screens. And again, this is where I will openly admit my level of knowledge is low. I've deliberately stayed ignorant a little bit on some of the techie stuff because I don't have any desire to learn it, but I know people that do know this stuff. And I know they've just done a test in LA on the XR stage of a film on the wall, which won't have had a sync box, so it kind of stuck to the screen. So I don't know if they've done it with phasing. I don't know how they've done that, so I'm learning about that. I think you can shoot like 48 or 60 frames, but I don't think more than that you start to get sort of weird strobing in the same way that you would on a TV or a well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't get strobing. It's no idea. I don't know. It's a test. I would love to see somebody answer that question. You've got the best volume in the world sitting right there. Why don't you test it?
Snow from Warwickfield, he says that do you need any special lenses or camera sensor filters to deal with the LED light being emitted?
No, you don't really. Again, going back to Mandalorian, we chose a big sensor and an embolic lenses to have the background get out of focus. I'm not going to make an assessment on which cameras work best on the volume because I don't think that's fair. I have an opinion about it, but I don't think it's smart for me to say that because just because I think something is better doesn't necessarily mean it should. Other people shouldn't test other things and have different opinions. So I have an opinion about what sensors work better than others, but it's not just the sensors. Like it's also the panels. So you think about the panels were designed for display. The panels were designed to go at Crown Casino, and they weren't designed to light an actor. So you need a sensor that's the most willing to make substandard lighting sources look as good as possible, if that makes sense. So if we're talking honestly, as good as the panels are, the new panels are good, but they're still not as great as as the high end, the cream source LEDs or the high end LEDs. Like they're not designed for cinematographers. Sony, I think, are about to come out with one that is, but it's super expensive. And I'm sure the companies will come out with them soon, but they don't currently exist. So I think you just need to test all the cameras you to get the best skin tone that you possibly can, whichever works the best for you.
Any more online that you can see there, Greg?
Talking about atmospherics, would you be able to talk about any challenges of using atmospheric effects within the volume space? So yes, it's a very good point, and that's part of the problem with the volume about making it not look dead. Sometimes the air in a volume can look a bit dead, and that's because it's hard to get wind, because the LEDs can be a little bit fragile, so you can't add dust like you would in a normal set. You can add smoke, but having too much wind can sometimes be a problem. Having water is a big issue because those things aren't waterproof. So on Batman, I mean, again, that's the perfect example, because we wanted every scene to be in the rain. Like, the director wanted them to be drenched as they're talking, but we just couldn't run a wet set because it would affect the screen. So there's only one scene in the Batman on the volume that's raining, and that's the scene where he turns the searchlight on at the beginning. There's a shot of Gordon standing next to the searchlight. And effectively, we put the searchlight in the middle of the set, and we ran plastic around the edges so no water got onto the screen. And we ran water just above him and just on the light. And then we also did that last, so that if we did destroy the screens, I've got our shots. So yeah, it's a bit of a problem. But I think the next round of volumes that get built, in 5-10 years, will be probably on exterior panels that have a rating for water and dust, and that have a really good quality for light. Michael Easter asked about how to use DOT in live grades. That's an important one too, because part of the value of, it's not just the DOT, because remember, you've got the subject that you're filming, and then you've got the wall. If your DOT starts to grade your subject that you're filming, then the people who are grading the wall, they start adjusting their color. It's like you're both moving the goalposts around. So you're best off deciding on a LUT, and then that LUT on the DOT doesn't do live grade. But what the volume people do is that they grade the backgrounds to look good and to integrate well with your foreground. So that's the experience that we had on all of our shows. It's the background grades. Because also too, there's a link. Sometimes there's a surface of the ground that links to the background. So they have to get the ground looking the same as the background. So that's their job.
Really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic presentation, and I just want to ask, what's next for you? Where do you go to from here? Because you did say to me at one point you'd already known as the volume guy. Then what's next to you?
I was going to make some smart ass comment about next is the pool, because it's very hot outside, and I know it's been cold in Melbourne, but I wouldn't say that, because that's really rude. Yeah, what's next is I don't know. It's a good question. What interests me is doing stuff that is hard and that has a high degree of difficulty, high degree of failure possibility. So there's a few animation things I'm working on at the moment. There's a few gameplay things that I'm working on at the moment. Looking at some films, just some regular films, some regular normal old shooting films, like that. I'll have to remember what they like, shooting on a normal camera, shooting film. But I don't know. It's a brave new world, and effectively what I'm seeing is that people are getting very confused about what is the future, and I think it's really simple. I think our role as a cinematographer and a designer will exist forever. They have to, because otherwise, who are the people lensing your product, and who are the people designing your product? You're going to have a film that looks like a dog's breakfast because it was designed by a committee, let's say, or it looks like a dog's breakfast because it was shot by a committee. So you still need, our roles still exist. So for me, I guess I'm just trying to watch the technology, and I'm trying to push myself into places that are a bit scary, a bit new. So yeah.
And Tomas, what's next for you, mate? Are you out there got a couple of film projects on the go at the moment?
Well, I'm working with Greg on any of his projects, and I'm trying to work on my own stuff as well as a cinematographer. And I just find myself using Unreal for some of the short films I do as well, which is exciting.
So you're down here in Melbourne at some stage, and like to catch up and maybe have a bit more of a chat. It'd be great. Thanks very much, guys, for giving your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant, fantastic presentation. We're really thrilled for you to give up your time to be with us. Can you please thank Greg and Tomas for coming on the